I'm Vince Ganzberg with United Soccer Coaches. My current position is Education Content Coordinator. It's a fancy word for curriculum development for all of our coaching courses for United Soccer Coaches, formerly known as the NSCAA. Before then, I was a coaching education consultant for US Soccer, where I designed the F license, which was an online course for 5 to 8 year old coaches. Prior to that, though, I was a state director of coaching for Indiana Youth Soccer. I did that for 10 years. But really, before then, I was a high school teacher and a high school coach. And I thought I was going to do that the rest of my life. And lo and behold, here I am as a full time coaching educator. But my heart and passion is I love high school sports. I love what high school coaches offer and what they can do for a kid. And, because a high school coach could be the best thing going in a kid's life. So just want to say thank you for watching. And I hope that you get something out of it. So this is called building a model session, and model is in italics because the whole idea is that you build a training session based on what's called a game model. And a game model, I'm sure some of you are, if you're keeping up with the game, you're realizing that a lot of programs, a lot of professional teams, college teams, and hopefully even high school teams have what's called a game model, which is basically a way you want your team to play. So we'll go ahead and get started. This presentation, I'm going to talk about what a game model is, talk about or show an example of what's called a team glossary and how you can relate that to your practice design. And then designing a practice based on your game model, the idea of reflection, the importance of it. And then basically at the end, we'll talk about memories versus moments. So this is an example of a game model. And really what a game model is, it's we have the ball, then we lose the ball, and now we have to defend a counterattack. And then after we're not successful winning the ball back right away, and then we have to defend, right? So now we have to defend, we have to prevent the other team from scoring. So in other words, they have the ball. When we win it back, now can we counterattack? And what does that look like? And then if we don't counter and score right away, well, then can we keep the ball? And what does that look like? So what a game model is basically what you want your team to look at when your team has the ball, what you want your team look like when they're defending the counter, what you want your team to look like when they're preventing scoring, and also counterattacking. And then it's just a cycle. Well, your game model is based on a few things. Your system of play. So do you have a system of play that fits your team, or do you just say, look, this is the system we're playing because this is what I've done all my coaching career? It's up to you. It's your personal preference. I've tended always to like to say, okay, I'm going to start with the system that I have in mind. Maybe it's a 1-4-4-2, but during the season, I might make adjustments based on my players' qualities. And I think really at the end of the day, your system should be dependent upon your players' technical qualities, tactical qualities, physical qualities, and psychological qualities are the four components of the game. This is just an example. So then what style of play do you have? And in the style of play, right, what do we want to look like when we have the ball? Well, we want to attack. We want to be aggressive. We want to pick the right moments to go forward. We want to create goal scoring opportunities. And then maybe I have some bullet points basically on when we have the ball. So we want to maybe, tend to go wide first, and then you have the freedom to be dangerous in wide areas. It might be we want to always outnumber the opponent in the flank areas. You can add that in there in your style of play. In other words, you want a lot of combination play in the flanks. What do you want when your team is defending or they're without the ball? Well, here it says we want to defend both in a medium block and a high block or in a high press system. That's the way we are going to play based on what we have. And now you might have, as a coach, your idea of what you want. But again, when you're discovering your team, And each team, every season, I don't care what you say, every season's different because you got seniors that move on, you got new freshmen that come in, and thankfully the freshmen that you had grow a little bit, and they've changed. So you have a style of play. You have with the ball, without the ball. Then you have what's called a counter press or a counter attack. What we want to do when we counter attack. Um, what's our philosophy there, and then what's our match ethos, right? What's our we're always going to do this every match. These are non-negotiables. These are essentials. So we're going to always compete. We're going to earn every inch. So that's a style of play. Write all that down. Figure it out. With the ball, without the ball, right? Transition or counterattacks and or countering, and then what's your match ethos? And then this is a match procedure, and I'm just full disclosure. This what I just showed you is my son's a college coach, and this is part of what he had for his team a few years ago, not last year, but a few years, actually 2 or 3 years ago. And so the first 10 and the last 10, they're always the loudest, right? So lightning and thunder, that's kind of what they call it at the beginning of each game. When they celebrate, the whole team celebrates. If they get scored on, they all get together and they reframe. So these are some match procedures that you can teach your players. So let's talk about a game model related to the thirds of the field, related to your playing philosophy or the style of play that we just showed, for example, earlier, and then also maybe your system. So you have the attacking field, and then you have usually in thirds. So the defending third, uh, for me, it's called the risk zone, right? We don't want to mess around with it back there. We want to be safe. We want to play simple. This is when we start the attack, and these are all like the pieces that we want our players to understand that when we're in the risk zone, these words are important, or these ideas and concepts are crucial. Then we get into the middle third, and I call that the retention zone. So we want composure. Can we connect passes? Can we play 2 or 3 touches in there? Can we keep the ball rolling? Um, find open spaces, stretch the field, switch play when needed, and penetrating by passing or dribbling. So when we look at the middle third, this is kind of some qualities that we're looking from our team in the middle third. In the attacking third, which is called the reward zone, excuse me, then we have, we want to be aggressive. When we're 1 versus 1, we want to take them on, get wide first, and then get creative, get in the box, show creativity, or unlock the door, if you will. Maybe, you got to always have a player that can pick a lock. And so that's definitely when you want to spotlight them. So again, it comes down to a little bit sometimes your personnel. Same thing with defending. What key qualities do you want in each third? So again, defending third, risk zone. we got to be really good 1v1 defending. We got to be able to block shots and crosses, and we definitely have to stay connected, especially with our goalkeeper. So instead of saying in the middle third, retention zone, that's for attacking. And defending, it's the regain zone. So can we regain the ball back at least in the middle third? That's the deepest we want to regain the ball back or regain possession. So again, what are those qualities that you're looking for in that middle third? And then the attacking third. Can we pressure the ball right away? Can we win the ball back? We're usually numbers down. So how do we train? How do we prepare to defend when we're numbers down? And how much pressure on the ball? So these are all key things. Do we force them inside to our help, or do we force them down the line and show them the line so maybe we can win the ball in a pocket, for example, in the middle third and the attacking third? So maybe you want to create little pockets or create a hot zone, if you will, in maybe the flank areas of the middle third and the attacking third. So these are just some ideas. After that, well, then can you create a glossary, a language? Can your team have a common language that everybody learns from the time they're freshmen to the time they're seniors. And these are just a few of them. You can make your glossary really long, uh, but it should always relate to the principles of play, your style of play, um, and your philosophy. So instead of saying, instead of me telling a player, "Hey, you need to penetrate by dribbling," I'm just going to say, "Hey, you need to get forward," and get forward means we penetrate by dribbling. Well, where would that take place? In the middle third or the attacking third? Maybe in the defending third from an outside back. Uh, s- Support could be, instead of saying support, it could just be, "Can we help?" Right. So help could be the language that we use. Spread out, open hand could be language that you use, for example, for the meaning of width. Safe. So if your goalkeeper, for example, is yelling safe to your outside back that has the ball and the route's blocked, instead of forcing it down, the goalkeeper can yell safe, and that means drop it back to your center back or drop it back to me, and then we can change the point of attack and go the other way. So let's be safe with the ball. And then when the ball's in the attacking half, maybe we have these buzzwords or code words. So can you create a glossary for your team based on your the principles, but also that reflect your game model that you're trying to get your team to play and embrace? Defending. So in other words, instead of saying press, it could just be, "Hey, get their head down." That means get pressure on the ball. Um, Connect means, "Hey, let's make sure that we're connected with our teammate that's pressuring the ball." So that's providing cover. Staying together, right? Together, or we can just say as one. I had a high school team one time. That was our cue, our coaching cue, or our coaching word was as one. It's taken from the movie Gladiator. And that means we get together, right? We get together, we stay tight. That's so we use that for our like code word, if you will, for balance and compactness. And patience, drop, that means transition from attack to defend. So come up with a glossary, terminology, so your team speaks a common language. And it's really important because you're going to have some kids that come from clubs, they're learning a certain style. But you know what? When they're in your high school program, it's your high school program. So make it your high school program. And maybe they'll take this idea and implement it back with their clubs. So these are just some ideas on for a glossary and what you can try and start to implement. Now I'm going to go into practice design. And how do you design a practice based on your game model? So here are some considerations. First off, your first consideration is you should always say yes to the S's. And I got this from a friend of mine who used to teach in the Boston public schools. And the S's stand for skills, right? We want to say yes to developing skills. Sweat doesn't mean we run them until they just sweat so much that they collapse. It means exercise, that they're physically moving with a purpose. And by the way, any unplanned conditioning these days is actually considered a traumatic experience. So those moments when you get with your, frustrated with your team and you say, "All right, you know what, if you guys don't want to listen, that's fine. Let's just get on the line and we're just going to run the rest of practice." Believe me, I am very guilty of that in my younger coaching days. However, I heard somebody speak on um, that that's actually considered traumatic. And 60% of kids before the age of 16 have experienced some sort of trauma in their life. So that's a long thing about sweat. But basically, just make sure that they're engaged physically and they're moving and they're learning those important movement skills. Smiles, just they got to enjoy themselves. You have to enjoy yourself. And then safety, that's your number one concern and consideration as far as the S's are concerned. I mean, the parents are entrusting you with their most precious thing in their entire life. And the last thing they want their kid to do is to come home emotionally a wreck because of words that you said or words that you expressed to them. Or they got hurt because we didn't anchor a Corver goal and the Corver goal fell and it hit him on the head. Right now, that's different from a regular goal. Thank goodness. But again, you can control the safety part of it. And, and if it's too hot, doggone it, it's too hot to practice. If it's too cold, it's too cold. So safety is your number one priority, period, when it comes to a practice. And then lastly, can you keep your practices simple? That's one of the hardest things to do sometimes, because I think sometimes we overthink. Uh, for me, I know that, like, I've got 4 or 5 go-to activities that I know I can use anytime during a practice, and I can apply it in different ways based on what we're trying to accomplish. So you don't need to come up with a whole 600 drills, if you will. Just come up with 5 or 6 really good activities, and then feather in other types of activities that will build around that activity. And I think you'll make a simple practice for yourself. So just and the game is a simple game. It's really simple. We have the ball, we don't have the ball. We can either go through the opponent, around the opponent, or over the opponent. And when we don't have the ball, don't let them get through us, around us, or over us. It's a pretty simple game when you think of it that way. So a lot of times when we design a practice, we'll write down the activities and we'll write down what it is. And I remember as a coach, I would use my prep hour, right, to design these diagrams and everything. And then I'd list coaching points. So what I think something to consider is that would help you is, what does learning look like? Well, what learning look like should relate to your coaching points. Well, your coaching points in this situation should relate to your game model, the style that you want to play, or your philosophy as a team or as a coach. So, what does learning look like? So, those are my coaching points. Instead of writing out all these elaborate coaching points, I'm just going to write down what does learning look like, and I'm going to maybe bullet a few items there. Again, that relates to the game model, the style, the philosophy. Then, what does learning sound like? Well, can you take pieces from that glossary and maybe, for example, I want to hear the word spread out today, or we need to hear the word safe, or we need to hear the word press, or or as one, right? So, like I referenced earlier. So those are things I want to hear, and then it might relate to your philosophy. Maybe I don't want to hear any negative talk to a teammate. I want to hear uplifting comments to teammates, and that includes me as well, right? As a coach, uh, you can be demanding without being demeaning. So, again, what does learning sound like? So we go into some considerations here, and when we're preparing for practice, and this is, by the way, just one way to do a practice. There are many ways. U.S. Soccer has what's called orientation learning implementation. That's a good method for training as well. You can do a whole part whole type practice if you want. You can even just do a recovery practice if you need to, if your players are just tanked. So here are some things to consider. Again, how can we take the game model that we've created, and I forgot to mention that really you should have your players involved in creating a game model, because players buy in what they help create. And so, can you create a practice that relates to your game model? Can you include or implement universal design learning, which is basically, how can you adhere to um, different learning styles, or how can you accommodate, sorry, that's a better word, to different learning styles? When are you going to do this? So when are you going to implement the idea of what's called a community of practice, when, for example, two teams get together and they talk about problems and talk about solutions? How do you want to do the universal design learning? Just throw out another example here. You might have a kid that's colorblind. So if and I used to have a policy, everyone wears a bib. I'm tired of saying, no, that team's wearing bibs and I'm not wearing bibs, or whatever. For some reason, I just eliminated that and said everyone's wearing a bib, until I had a young individual that was colorblind. And the young individual came up to me, and she said, "Coach, I'm colorblind and I can't distinguish the differences between the two vests. So I said, wow, okay. So I researched, what do I do? And so what I found out was, well, maybe one team wears vests and one team doesn't. And that's just the reality. But I have to try and figure out a way that to not create interference in that player's mind so they can perform. There is a phrase or an equation, potential minus interference equals performance. So every player has potential, every team has potential. Your job as a coach to reduce or eliminate interference so they can perform. Well, the way you can do that is by implementing UDL, or Universal Design Learning, or if you've taken a federation course or one of our courses, use the toolkit, right? Maybe you coach at a natural stoppage, maybe you coach individually. So that's a long way of saying change your teaching strategies for your players. Can you add what's called contextual interference with technique? Um, and basically, it's what it sounds. So maybe you add a little bit of pressure. It could be an obstacle. It could be someone chasing someone or shadowing somebody. But can you add some what's called contextual interference when you're teaching or training technique? And then can you consider two actions when you train technique? And this can mean, you include physical literacy. Maybe it's SAQ, speed, agility, quickness. So they pass the ball and then they sprint to another cone and back. And then they pass the ball again to their teammate, sprint the ball and back, sprint to another cone and back, or maybe they shuffle to another cone and back. So you're including more movement actions. I'm going to show an example here in just a little bit of Arteta with Arsenal and how he kind of does two actions within training technique. And then lastly, can you show or can you consider where they're at physically? Where's the team at psychologically? But can you relate it to your game model? Can you relate it to your match procedure that I showed earlier? So you got to consider all these things that when you're designing a practice. And the challenge is, as a high school coach, you have 3 games in a week sometimes, and they're tanked. Especially if you play your juniors and your seniors a lot, and they play full 80 minutes, and you don't give them any rest. So they're going to be tanked. I don't care how good they are. And no one's good when you're tired. You're just not. And I'll show the example of 2 actions with technique at the end of this presentation, just so you all kind of have an idea what I'm talking about. So now we have a sample model practice. So this practice is based on the game model that was shown to you earlier. And now I'm going to take pieces of that game model and design a practice from that. So you have to look at, okay, what is our game model? What's the style of play that we want to have? What's the philosophy? And other things that are in the game model too that I left out, and I probably should have kept it in, I apologize, is what's each player's positional responsibility as well, right? So some of you might have a 9A, which is a center striker, and a 9B, which is a center striker as well. But maybe 9A is your post up center striker, and your 9B is your center striker that makes runs forward or whatever to kind of get in the spaces behind. Again, depends on your personnel. It depends on your players, their qualities, technical qualities, tactical, physical, and psychological qualities. You might only have 1 9, and so that could be a problem. So figure out all those things. What's your model? What's the style of play? What's your philosophy? What positional responsibilities do we want to get out of training today? And again, this is all though established, hopefully, in the preseason. But you should always visit your game models during the season, and definitely after the season when it's time to reflect and think about your season overall. Going back to earlier on in this presentation, so the style of play, and I put in green, maybe some things that we need to work on. And maybe I'm realizing that we are not picking the right moment to go forward. We are forcing it. We are trying to penetrate when it's not on to penetrate, and we have to figure out how we got to stretch the opponent a little bit more, get them out in the wide areas so the middle opens up, so we soften up that middle. And then it's in bold down here in the first bullet point in the with the ball column. Maybe we're not being aggressive and free flowing. Maybe we're too rigid. It could be, well, because we're playing a really good opponent, but maybe you've seen a trend that we're just not being ourselves. So I'm going to come up with a training session that is based on, for example, a style of play. So now we revisit the thirds again. So the defending third, okay, we're okay there based on what we're seeing so far. We're playing simple, we're playing safe. We haven't given up any unnecessary passes in the back. But here's where we're having some problems. Maybe we are not looking to scan, right? Or we're not looking for options. We're not scanning the field. We're not keeping the ball rolling. The ball dies when the ball gets into the midfield. We have limited mobility. There's no movement off the ball. And we just don't change the point of attack when we need to. So again, based on the game model, based on what we're looking at, and on our team. And then the attacking third, I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm really just going to focus on this middle third and maybe, a little bit into the defending third and a little bit into the attacking third. So it's kind of a whole area, and that's where the training session is going to be focused. But again, though, it comes from the game model. So before we plan, what are our concerns? Are we, again, not looking for options? Are we forcing the ball in the middle of the third? We're giving up the ball too much in the middle third. What are our strengths? Well, we have a really good six defensive holding midfielder that can change the point of attack for us, and we're just not using them. What's our physical readiness? Are we ready to play, or are we tanked? Psychologically, did we just lose a really tough game to someone that we haven't lost to before? Or did we just beat a team that we've never beaten before? Man, we are on cloud nine. What's the physical load? Is it going to be a low intense session? Is it going to be medium? Is it going to be high? That's a whole different presentation, by the way, on sports performance. If you can, how long are we going to work and rest for each activity? And then can we implement universal design learning? Figure out times and moments to implement UDL. So these are some things to consider before planning. And then obviously look at your game model and say, okay, what are our concerns? Based on our game model, how can we improve? Now, as I mentioned before, this is just one method to practice your players. So when I know that and I'm an assistant coach, and a lot of times the head coach would say, Vince, would you run training today? And I would say, okay, I'm going to run it off the game model because I've been watching that we're not penetrating when we can in the middle third. We're just playing around with it. There's no purpose in mind. So I'll come up with this type of practice design. Pre-practice, what's it look like? Activation with or without, and CI stands for contextual interference. So if, for example, they played a really tough game, I might just do an activation, which is a warm-up, without contextual interference. In other words, just get the body moving, just get the range of motion going, get the blood flowing. Step 3 is a game sense or a game-based activity, or a small-sided game or a medium-sized game. Like medium-sized games to me are like 5-a-side to 7-a-side, or 8-a-side. 8-a-side, you're tinkering into more of a large-sided game. So I'm going to talk about a game sense or a game-based approach, or a small-sided game with a condition, maybe with a challenge, or it's a constraint. It's something that it's unusual, where they got to figure out problems, but they're also working on their technical qualities, and they're basically learning how to turn technique into skill. And that's what we need. And then after that, you got to get real and get into a positional game, and then get into a team game, and then what are you going to do after practice? And I think that's really, really important that you consider what you do after practice. So pre-practice, just some things to consider. Uh, so I've got my team, and let's imagine that this is pre-pandemic or post-pandemic when we're allowed to give handouts. Or what you can do is you can take your practice plan, put on a laminated card, if you will, or laminate your practice plan and give them to your players and have the players discuss the practice plan in small groups. And now I know it's probably like something you've never considered, but giving them time to look over the practice plan actually helps. Research has shown that our mind wanders 40 to 50% of our day. And one of the tools you can do is at the beginning of a training session or a practice is giving them the plan, have them reflect on it. Anson Dorrance, he has his players jog together on their own. It's their time. It's their time to be in small groups. So give them some time to discuss in small groups. And maybe it's just, let's just catch up on the day, right? And how was your day at school? Again, positive welcome, positive language. Hey, it's great to see you. Um, you know, glad you're here. You might be the best thing going for a kid, a high school player. So be that person. Be that person that they can't wait to get on the field because they know they're going to feel safe. They're going to feel belong. And you're going to make sure that they don't have a hole in their heart anymore. And uh, welcome their thoughts. Get their readiness level. One thing you can do is if you want, if you feel like, give them all an index card at the beginning of practice and say, all right, from 1 to 10, 1 being I feel awful, like I need to sit out today, coach, to 10, I'm ready to go. I'm raring. I'm ready to play hard. Write a number down, 1 to 10. Collect those. Maybe have your assistant kind of look at them. And, if it averages out to about a 6 or a 7, okay, then you could probably go with the practice plan you want. If, however, it's like the majority of the kids are saying they're a 2 or a 3, then you might have to reconsider what you do. So you might have to get, that's the great thing about coaches and teaching is you have to be a chameleon. You have to change quickly. Sometimes you have to be able to adjust and adapt. That's what coaching's all about. So after you do all that, and then, by the way, those are just suggestions. Those aren't, musts. Those are just things that I've done in the past that seem to work. Begin to the activation period or the warm up. So maybe I'm going to do just a simple, based on my game model. Remember the game model that we talked about. We want to really work on penetrating through the midfield. So just a simple line passing activity, working out the bugs. Maybe I plan in some dynamic stretching in there. It could be I have a cone on the back end. So after the player passes the ball to the end line, they got to run around a cone and maybe they shuffle back to the back of the line. So that's putting 2 actions or speed, agility, and quickness into your warm up. And it's just a real simple passing activity back and forth. But the emphasis, what do I want learning to look like? Well, I want the passes to be on the ground. I might have to remind them, right? And we need accuracy. And one of the things that's based on our game models, we in the middle part of the field, we need to keep the ball moving. So can we do this activity with the ball never stopping? Can we do it without stopping? Well, after that, it might be boring for some kids. Might be too simple. So can we add in what's called contextual interference? So here's an idea that actually this is from Barcelona. Sometimes coaches are great borrowers of activities. And so, I watched a clip one time with Messi and you had Griezmann, just doing this little activity with their team. And they're just passing back and forth to each other. And then they had mannequins and then they passed the ball through the mannequin to their teammate and kept the ball going. If you don't have mannequins, use large cones. Heck, have injured players stand there. Have players that played 80 minutes for 3 games, have them stand there for a little bit, and or just use little cones if you want to. You can buy those little Bozo the Clown bopper things at stores now for like $5. Just inflate them and bring them out there. Use them as mannequins if you don't have the budget. Like my school doesn't have the budget here where I live, which is Indianapolis, Indiana. So now we add contextual interference. Here's just another um, idea for contextual interference, but now we're going to emphasize bending the ball. Now you need a little more length, so I would definitely put this to like 40 yards in length. But it's the same type of idea. Maybe they do a little give and go. Player passes, runs around the mannequin, gets it back, plays it back, and now maybe the final ball. You tell them the final ball. You want them to bend it around into the opposite line. So now you're giving them, and by the way, that's all applicable to playing in the middle third of the field. What does learning look like? Well, all the things we just said before, but now we're going to talk about bending the passes. So we talk about universal design learning. If they don't know how to bend the ball, maybe you say, all right, hey, we're going to do we're going to do the whole part whole technique. I'm going to show what bending a ball looks like. We're going to break it down, and then they're going to practice in pairs. Just get 20 yards apart from each other, practice in pairs. How to, sorry, longer than that, maybe 30 yards. How do we bend the ball and give them the outside or inside of the foot? And just have them practice back and forth. You do that for 5 minutes. And boy, they can get a lot out of that. So again, maybe you got to think, you know what, maybe I got to build in some dyad learning here, which is pairs. And how do we build that in? So now we get into a game-based activity. And this is a 4-goal game series that I really like to play. The kids like it. Remember, I said that you don't need 600 drills. You can just take one game and change it and bring out a lot of different things. So a 4-goal game number one, you got the game field, got the small goals are off, they're off the field, and they got to score from inside the field into the small goal. Okay, great. So it could be 4 to 6 players. It could be 5 aside. You can put them by position as well. You can have 3 backs with 2 midfielders. You can have 3 midfielders with your 9A and your 9B. You can structure it that way. What does learning look like? These are my coaching points for this activity. Well, we want to keep the ball rolling. Maybe we need to look and scan for the options. When's it time to play it into that net? And what does learning sound like? Maybe we need to spread out. So these are words I'm going to be listening for. 4-goal game number 2. Same game. Maybe we switch the players around. You can have 2 fields going at one time. And now we just angle the goals in. So, and it's very realistic to playing in the middle thirds, because if you can penetrate inside into that zone 14, again, from the game model, can you get into that middle zone where a lot of the goals are generated? Boy, that's gold. So what does learning look like? Well, it might be that for this game, really emphasizing movement off the ball. So like in this example, you have a player that's passing. Now this defender's probably going to come and pressure. So maybe now this player has to bend the ball into this runner that's running, into this player that's running into that space, and then maybe they can play that ball. And if you think about it, it's really like the activation activity, just more people, right? Just opponents are in there. So it's 4-goal game number 2. And what does learning sound like? So maybe I want to listen to, okay, are we looking to play through? Are we looking to spread out? And then I'm going to play another game, 4-goal game number 3. And you can do this, by the way, in a 25, 30-minute window. Just do 3 of these little games, change them. But now the goals are faced outward. So now we're working on getting wide, and then getting forward, which is, again, something that happens in the middle third of the field. And so I'm going to look at movement off the ball, switching play when needed. So if this player can't play the ball down the line, maybe we got to take it back and we got to go the other way. They definitely have to figure out how to get wide, and they definitely have to spread out. So I'm going to be listening for maybe the word spread out. Hey, we got to spread out. So then I might have to say, all right, let's stop. When is it time to spread out? Hopefully you hear them say, well, when there's no pressure on the ball. Yes, that's a good cue. Or when the ball is played back to our teammate. Now we can expand, make an open hand, and get wide. You play, and you don't have to do 3 games. I mean, just do 2 of those. Whatever you feel like you need to get out of it. You get into a positional game. So now we call this functional training as well. So now we train players by their positions or by their roles, and we might do 3/4 of a field because again, what are we trying to really work on? We're trying to work on that the middle third of the field, getting through that middle third of the field, but we need a little bit of space in the defending third, a little bit of space in the attacking third. So that's kind of what this field looks like. And the blue can be the focus team, if you will. You can even set the stage. You can even tell the gold team, "Hey, gold team, come here. I really want you to jam the middle, right? Don't worry about pressing the ball up high. Just jam the middle and just clog it up. Make them figure out how to get through us." So it's just a real simple positional game where you make a line with cones, and they can either dribble across the line or pass to a teammate that's running beyond the line. So play X amount of time for that. Usually the bigger numbers. So if I'm going to play, for example, in this situation, and again, I'm going to look for what learning looks like, what learning sounds like. And these are things based on our game model, based on the retention zone that we um, wrote down as qualities that we need. And we might say, all right, we need to stretch the game. So that might be something else that we add when it talks about what learning sounds like. What systems do you want to play to bring it out? Well, if you know you're working in the middle third of the field, I would suggest that you have the majority, if not all, of your midfielders in one unit, because otherwise it's not really real, and it's going to change the behaviors incorrectly. So you play a positional game. You're going to play. This is roughly a 9-a-side game. So maybe you play 7 minutes. You give them a break, and then you say, all right. At the break, you say, all right, blue team get together, gold team get together. Blue team, discuss amongst your teammates one way that we can do better as far as getting through that middle third and getting into that attacking third. Gold team, get together and talk about how you're going to stop them from getting in there. All right. And maybe what adjustments do you need to make? Let the athletes do the work. And then as a coach, you lend your expertise, you observe, which by the way, that's a tool that you should develop and figure out what else is needed. But let them come up with some of those ideas. Soccer's a player's game. So then after that, we play a team game. No restrictions. We're just going to play. And I apologize. The goal actually should be back to the end line. I used the wrong diagram. It's a senior moment. But I would just move the goal back. You could move the goal to the top of the box, but it doesn't reflect on what you just did. So maybe you can move the goal back and make it replicate what you just did in the positional game. Again, what does learning look like? What does learning sound like? Can we get forward? Can we stretch the game? And then what related to the game model, instead of saying the first 10, last 10, I'm gonna say, all right, hey, the first 5 minutes, you're loud. The last 5 minutes, you're loud. And maybe we're gonna play a 12-minute game. So that 2 minutes, they might not be loud, right? But in other words, first 5, last 5, we're going. We're kicking it. That's how you change behavior based on your game model. Post practice, get your players together. What do they learn? Again, let them do the work. Let them reflect. Ask them how hard the session was. You might have think, man, I designed a really hard training session today. And they might say, coach, that was a 7 or that was a 6. I'm like, oh, okay. Maybe I'm not challenging you enough. And then maybe we talk about the next game of practice. The other thing you can do is shake the players' hands after practice. A coach in New York I listened to the other day talked about how he shakes the players' hands at the end of practice. Because sometimes if you're coaching a player hard, the last thing you want them to do is leave practice and they're like resenting you. So can you shake their hand, have a policy where you shake their hand or give them knuckle bumps after practice? And maybe you coach that player hard and you say, hey, I got on you hard, but I do care about you. You can do this, right? We just need to keep going. And that's where, you can kind of change your mindset a little bit about how you in practice. Lastly, it's time to reflect. And look, I'm just sharing this for whatever it's worth. A lot of you get in your car and you reflect on practice, you reflect on athletes. It's just nature. And the problem is, if we have a spousal unit, we bring it in the home. And I can tell you right now, your spousal units usually don't want to hear about it. So when you reflect on your drive home, sit in your driveway for a minute or two extra if you have to, and then close the door and leave it. Just leave it. Um, so this is a mnemonic that talk about in our course as United Soccer Coaches, how you assess your own training session. And S stands for setup. In other words, was the session safe? Would the players have learned without my coaching? If I couldn't coach, my assistant coach, or JV coach had to run practice, and their experience level isn't quite as good as mine. Would they learn if I just gave my assistant coach that practice plan? Would they have learned? Challenging? Was it too challenging? Was it not challenging enough? Did they all have opportunities? And one of the challenges you have as a high school coach is you have a JV team, you have a freshman team. Some of you have 5 teams, I hear, because your school has a no cut policy. So can you provide opportunities for all the levels? And so that activation activity I showed you, I would have every player, all the players are doing that. We're not saying, all right, varsity, you go down here, JV, you're going down there. We're all doing it together. And you start developing a program that way as opposed to a team, just 1 year. Realistic, was the game realistic? Did it include the 4 components, the technical, tactical, physical, and psychological parts of the game? And educate. Did I apply universal design learning? Did I ask open-ended questions? It's really tough to answer a question yes or no when you start with how. So, and then, well, how do you think you get that ball from here to there? No, they're not going to say that. They might say, I don't know. Okay, let me show you. So at least you can check for understanding. A lot of us, we use open-ended questions, or we say, blah, 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 blah. Does that make sense? And they do this, and then they do exactly what you don't want them to do. So use open-ended questions. Maybe you got to rephrase or say, hey, do me a favor, repeat what I just said, or I'm going to repeat what you just said, right? Just so I understand what you're telling me. Afterwards, think to yourself, all right, as a coach in practice, am I making memories or am I making moments? And I think, one great thing for a high school coach is that you have the ability to make memories. And moments are little pieces that happen during a season, but can you make your season memorable? And one of the things you can do is being a coach that is prepared from beginning to end, everything from your game plan to your practice design to how you treat your athletes off the field, how you treat them on the field. And can you make those memories positive to where they really just simply love the game and maybe they want to be a fan for life? As promised, I'm going to show you the idea of having 2 actions when you're training techniques. So this is Arsenal. This is Arteta. It's not the laws module. I don't know why I got called that, but it's Arteta. And you'll see here, it's not rocket science, but a lot of times when we have players train technique, they just shoot once and that's it. So maybe we look at this this example. One shot, now they got another shot going in another direction. You notice Arteta is chasing me. Just chasing, just a little pressure. He rolls one ball, there's another ball, the other way, right foot, left foot. Right foot, he's going to roll the ball. That was a cut that way. That's a touch. We'll start with the keeper, so you might want to consider changing the goalkeepers. Come on, inside. And then a second technique. Now, could you have the shooter go to the defender, and the defender then rotates out? Right, so you can get a lot of players going really quickly just through a simple little rotation. but this is just a neat little example how I think
Inside!
as coaches,
Good
sometimes we just say, all right, we're just going to focus on shooting and that's it. And then, but in the game, that ball might rebound, or that ball might deflect off the defender, and man, they got to learn how to shoot again. So, and I appreciate your time. I hope you get something out of this. And if I can be of any help at all, let me share my one last share. I'm going to share my email just in case any of you want to get a hold of me. And I'm more than happy to do a presentation for you or your high school team or your high school program. I again, I have a special place in my heart for high school coaches, high school teachers, because I was one, and I think I still am one at heart because I just know that the high school game is a very special game. It's a very special opportunity for you to make memories that are life lasting, and that they'll always remember. So, thank you very much.